Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how Rishi Sunak has jumped the shark and is now promoting conscription as his next desperate attempt to win back some votes. However, when you look at the details, what Sunak is proposing is not what those who remember national service think it is, and even if it were, I don't think that would be what people would think it is either. Essentially, it's another massive con designed to fool a small section of the voter base, but have the Tories also accounted for the votes it might cost them. So after a couple of days of campaign disaster, the memes are flowing. Rishi Sunak retreated from the public yesterday in order to come up with a new plan. The plan announced today is national service, more commonly known as conscription. Now, the thing about national service is that whenever anyone tries to defend the idea, they end up focusing on the skills it can teach young people. Oh, they get to learn all these things. It's marvellous countries that do it have like really good education. It's like, if we want young people to have skills, that's not just charging a bale of hay with a knife, and we do, you deliver that through education. The fact of the matter is that the Conservatives have gutted the education budget, lifelong learning virtually non-existent, and they've hollowed out our armed forces as well. Like, national service is not the answer. The answer is rebuilding both our military and education services. And by promoting this national service idea, Sunak is opening himself up to attacks. For example, it invites opponents to remind us that the armed forces has been decimated since 2010 and that spending on state education has fallen dramatically as well. National service is a policy designed to appeal to the get some in crowd, the very oldest end of the voter base. In fact, you'd have to be nearly 80 to even remember being conscripted in this country. It ended in 1960. So you imagine this sort of, or even to remember it sort of happening, I should say. So you imagine this 8-year-old voter, roughly, a bit over really, who might think national service sounds like a great idea in terms of mobilising forces to protect us from Russia, because that's the lie. Oh, the problems, strife in Europe, we need Dad's army, except it's going to be like grandson's army. What if someone tells them that when Labour were last in power in 2010, the British Army had 113,000 regular forces. Now it's only got 75,000. Does that make it sound like the Conservatives are the party to attend to our military defences? And it's such a simple stat to throw out there that if Labour were to detect that this somehow is having some cut through on the public, which I really don't think it will, but let's say it did, they could easily fire back with something like this. Then there's the funding element. So Rishi Sunak claims it'll cost £2.5 billion a year. Now, in terms of what he's claiming this will be, like hell it will, if you're going to conscript almost every 18-year-old in the country, it would cost a fortune. Even bear in mind, so Rishi Sunak has said that this is going to be like one weekend a month, by the way. So it's not like full time either. One weekend a month. It's like, okay. Even then, it would cost a fortune. Like, even if you had some exemptions for some people, as they did when we last had conscription, bone spurs, stuff like that, you'd be talking over 500,000 places needed. Because there are over 700,000 18-year-olds in the country right now. So you really would be talking, you must be talking over 500,000 at least in the scheme, if it were to be rolled out across the whole country. Like 500,000 young people that need paying for this time, this weekend a month, housing, the cost of the training, and who would train them? Where are you going to get this massive cohort of military and non-military teachers to train this 500,000 people? And where would you train them? Where are we putting the barracks which serve purely to train and accommodate 500,000 conscripts? Oh, right, rotating around, admittedly. So you might be talking £150,000 each weekend, say. 150,000 people, each weekend. As well as having to accommodate the teachers and other staff on the barracks. And also, that'd be over 500,000 people a year. And that's with substantial exemptions. Could be 600,000. Could be all 700,000. But conscription lasts a few years, doesn't it? You don't just do it for 1 year. So in the first year, it'd be every 18-year-old. Then in the second year, it'd be every 18-year-old and every 19-year-old. And then, so once it's in full swing, you would need these teachers and accommodation to pay for, millions. And then there's the loss of revenue to the Treasury, because conscription means taking hundreds of thousands of young people out of the workplace, albeit for one weekend a month. But nonetheless, they have jobs at the weekend. So you create extra job shortages, which I suppose will mean more immigration needed, for something that doesn't add to our GDP. So productivity goes down. And because they're not earning as much, because they're not earning on those weekends, they won't be earning as much as they would be anyway. They'll have to be paid something, I assume. Then that means lower tax receipts for the Treasury. So in terms of what the target voters think this scheme will do, there's no way it would only cost £2.5 billion a year. And it won't. I gather the plan announced is actually only going to cover about 30,000 people. It's difficult for me to find definite numbers on this because there's not really much of a published plan. But however you look at it, however this would be realised in practice, it's not what those 80-year-old voters are imagining right now when they think, oh, reintroduce national service, because it can't possibly be like it was in the 50s. It's not a policy which stands up to any sort of scrutiny. And the thing about general election campaigns is you do tend to get more scrutiny than normal, even of the Conservatives. I mean, even 30,000 conscripts added to the regular army one weekend a month would still be way smaller than the army was in 2010. Remember, right now, 75,000 regular servicemen and women, it was 113,000. And where is the detailed plan for this published? There isn't one, because they've just made it up. Also, even if some of those target voters understand that this isn't national service as we used to have it, that it's small scale and will only ever be small scale, so it still has this budget of £2.5 billion allocated to it, right? Where does that money come from? Because the Tories are trying to talk about more tax cuts when the budget already can't afford to maintain public services properly. Our debt is already increasing, and economists say taxes are going to have to go up somewhere if we're going to stop that debt just piling up and up and up. Where are we getting the £2.5 billion from? This thing that doesn't add anything to our GDP. And even if you believed that the government could find the £2.5 billion down the back of the sofa or something, for something which doesn't contribute any net benefit to the economy, would this be the best way to spend it? What about using the money to actually increase the size of our regular army? What about using it to get more teachers, doctors or nurses? And let's say this target 80-year-old-ish voter doesn't think about any of these things. They think back to their youth, those halcyon days. They think, oh, my national service did me well. And, and indeed some people did appreciate it at the time. And they think it would be good for the country. What about the younger voters who don't like the idea of their children or grandchildren being forced away from their families and lives, thrown into a boot camp once a month? Essentially, I'm asking if the Tories have thought this through. And by thought it through, I mean tested the idea out on target voters, as well as stress tested it with counters, got devil's advocates to attack it and see if those attacks will work on their target voters. I suspect not. Mind you, on the subject of polling about national service, I'm inevitably going to get comments, some of you have probably already written them, about the famous Yes Prime Minister episode on this very thing, which should be a warning itself. You should probably think twice before adopting a policy that was lampooned in Yes Minister. But as part of that episode, it explained how you could engineer a survey to come out with contradictory conclusions, to suit your agenda. You could do a survey and get a majority of people to say, yes, we approve of national service. Or you could do the same thing with the same group of people and get them to say, no, we don't approve. And that was just someone wrote a script for that. And you go, okay, but that's not real. But it has, did you know it's been tested out? Just a few months ago, this year, it was tested out. Ipsos did it. And it worked. It worked. 2 samples with different questions leading up to it. One sample got more people to say they supported national service. The other sample, asking very different lead-up questions, got more people to say they'd oppose it. And you may look at the results and go, oh, but it was less than 50% in each case, Phil, not a majority. Bear in mind, when people are being unscrupulous with surveys, they take away the don't knows, and then it looks like a majority. Lies, damned lies and statistics. Link in the description below if you want to have a look at the details. But as to this policy announcement, so in summary, I would say the following. First, the policy doesn't do what they claim. It's not national service for 18-year-olds. It's national service for fewer than 5% of 18-year-olds. Sunak says that every 18-year-old would have to spend 1 weekend a month volunteering in civil residence. Volunteering. So how many are going to volunteer? Some may. Some may volunteer. Fine, whatever. But we don't have the facilities to do it. We don't actually have the infrastructure to do this. We don't have the staff. We don't have the transport infrastructure, and we don't have the money. I mean, given that the plan is to do 1 weekend a month, and there won't be a barracks in every community, imagine trying to get our public transport network to move hundreds of thousands of conscripts around the country at the beginning and end of every weekend, because although it's 1 weekend a month for each conscript, it will be on a rota, won't it? So every weekend, you're going to have a load of people having to be moved around the country. It's madness. And the fewer people it's for. So if it is only for 30,000 people, so, you know, that presumably means about 7,500 people each weekend. You can only have like a couple of barracks around the country, and yet this scheme's going to run across the country. So you're going to have to transport people much further, aren't you? And where would the barracks go? Let's see if this plan gets past the NIMBYs. It doesn't stand up on any level. And James cleverly said in an interview this morning, he said it will be compulsory. It was like, well, hang on, Rishi Sunak said it would be volunteering. There isn't compulsory volunteering. But also, he said, there would be no criminal sanctions for non-compliance. So it won't be compulsory then, will it? People say, right, you've been picked to go to this boot camp. It's compulsory. What happens if I don't go? Nothing really. Well, I'm not going then. It's almost like they haven't thought any of it through. I wonder what their harebrained scheme for next week will be when this falls flat. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later.